Dan Wilson, my friend, since 1994, or was it
94.
94. My last year, your first with the Mariners. No, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. That seems like a long time ago. But anyway, it's great to have you here and to talk baseball, philosophy, coaching, stories. I want to hear a Lou story. There's got to be like one great, because you do a great Lou.
Oh,
actually, yeah, we should touch on that. So you played 13 years in the bigs?
Yes.
13 years, and how many other years? So college was 4.
College was 3 years, and then about 2.5 years in the minor leagues, and then 13 years.
Where did you play in the minors?
My journey began in college at University of Minnesota. Then was drafted in June of 1990. I started out in Charleston, West Virginia. Was my first stop in the South Atlantic League, the Sally League, as they called it.
Must have been a little warm back then.
It was a little warm, a little humid.
Yeah.
And but it was a good league. We actually we won the championship that year, so that was kind of exciting. It was my first introduction to baseball, professional baseball. The next year, I ended up going back there to start the year, and then was promoted to AA at about the All-Star break. Spent the second half of the year in AA. Then I went to AAA Nashville. AA was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. AAA was in Nashville, Tennessee. Spent the whole entire season of 1992 in Nashville. Was called up in September, and then made the team in Cincinnati in '93. Bounced up and down a little bit that year, but and then was traded to the Seattle Mariners in 1994.
So the off season of '93? Yeah, the off season of '93. That you were in Puerto Rico. You were playing in Puerto Rico. I was in Puerto Rico,
right,
working out with Gar, Edgar Martinez, for those that don't know Gar. And he told me about you, that, hey, we just signed Dan Wilson.
Yeah, and we were down, we had just kind of started the winter ball season. I mentioned I was up and down that year quite a bit, and I didn't get a lot of at-bats, so they said, we want you to go play winter ball down in Puerto Rico, and I said, okay. So we went down there, and I can remember my wife calling me. She was still in the States, and she said, I think you just got traded. I think I saw it on ESPN. And then a couple of weeks later, the GM, I believe, was down. Woody Woodward came down to see Edgar, and he invited me to lunch, and Edgar came to lunch as well. And so I had a chance to meet Gar there for the first time, and he was my first Mariner that I met.
Did you know much about him beforehand?
You know, I didn't, only because I was in the National League, and at that, in those days it was a little bit different because there wasn't as much media attention as there is now, and so it's kind of hard to remember. But the leagues were pretty separate, the umpires were separate. I mean, the leagues were pretty separate. I obviously heard of Edgar Martinez, but I hadn't known how good of a player he was, just because I hadn't seen him play all that much.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is and then how many years playing before college, high school?
I mean, yeah, I think I probably started Little League and all that when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that.
So 25 years of baseball, maybe close to 30?
Right, yeah.
So a long time. So I think one of the things that I thought about that I wanted to ask you was about your influences as you were a player, those mentors, the coaches. Maybe they weren't in baseball. Maybe it was a pastor. Maybe it was somebody who made a difference in your life, who you said, okay, of my milestones, that was a person. So starting back at your earliest time, who are some of those folks, and what did they give you?
Yeah, I think it started out at home. My dad was very athletically minded, and I was the youngest of 3 boys, so we were a sports family, and whatever sport it was that season, that's kind of what we were into. It was baseball in the spring and summer, and football in the fall, and hockey in the wintertime, growing up outside Chicago. And I think for me, early on, it was my older brothers. I think my oldest brother was 7 years older than I was, and my other brother was 4 years older than I was. And for me, it was always this sense of trying to keep up with my brothers, and I wanted their respect. I wanted to be a good player at whatever I was doing because I wanted them to respect my ability And so I think I was always constantly trying to push myself to new limits so I could impress them. And I actually give them a lot of credit. And I've told them that, you know, a big reason for, especially at a young age, was I was always trying to play up and to be a better player than I was. And I think that set a foundation.
Did they acknowledge you? Did they acknowledge you, get improving, or
Yeah.
were they a little more?
Well, and they kind of chuckle about it because my position in hockey was a goaltender, and they'll say to this day that the reason I was a goalie was because they wanted to have a goalie. They were hockey players; they were not a goalie, but they wanted someone to shoot on all the time, and so they kind of would coerce me into getting in the net in the garage or in the driveway or wherever. And I took some pretty good shots.
Yeah. And they probably had a pretty good time doing it.
Yeah, they did, yeah. But again, that's, it made me better. It made me stronger, if not physically, mentally. And I remember getting hit in the arm and, oh, no, you're all right. You're all right. Don't worry about it. You don't have to cry, and just that ability to get back on my feet and get rolling again. I mean, that's a big gift, especially in sports.
The beginning of resilience,
Yes.
coming back.
Right.
The art of coming back, and especially with injuries, which is, I think, so interesting today of the people who don't have that background as being in athletics.
Mm-hmm.
That when they get an injury, it can be pretty debilitating. I mean,
Right.
mentally, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I get going again?
Right.
Will I live? Will I,
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson early on. What other gifts did they give you?
I think just that was really, I think maybe a love of sports, just that ability to understand that you could go on and athletics can be a vehicle. They both played sports in college. My oldest brother played golf and hockey at a small Division III school in Minnesota. My middle brother went on to West Point and played hockey there for Army, and so I was able to see too that athletics can open up opportunities for you, and if you can excel enough, that those opportunities will open up for you as long as you're a decent student as well. I think today, as long as we're saying it, that's a really important piece today, and I think can get overlooked, is the academic piece is pretty intense now in colleges, and the pressures that are put on the schools to help athletes graduate and getting into school is a lot harder, and that's really an important piece today.
Probably a lot more than what I experienced.
Yes.
I mean, I wasn't told that my grades were important. I squeaked by, but athletics was really all it. And I can't imagine what the pressure would be like today for young men. You know more today just because you're around them so much more. Plus your son, Eli.
Yeah, and having raised kids, I think it is. I mean, I think we were kind of sort of introduced to this Renaissance man kind of a theory on how we should grow up, that we should have different strengths. But I think today you really do need to have strengths in a lot of areas, and it's we do specialize in terms of athletics at a very young age, but academics are so important, I think, for kids today, because college is so competitive and tough to find spots and tough to find scholarships, and it's a different world out there than it used to be.
Do you think the combination of the pressure within excelling in sport at a collegiate level, plus the educational component of needing to really apply yourself, makes it a much more pressurized situation today?
I do, and I think it's had a huge impact on amateur athletics. I think, and I think to me it's been sad in a lot of ways to see what has happened. I mean, like I mentioned before, we were whatever the sport was during that season, and it would shift, and I thought was a very healthy way, both mentally and physically. You take a break from one sport and now you were into this other sport that maybe you weren't as gifted in, or it taught you different gifts or different athleticisms, if that's a word, and different movements. And so the whole picture at the end of the day was a better picture. And today kids specialize in sports so early, at 10, 11 years old. They're playing on traveling teams that specialize, and there's no time to do any other sports. And it's just one sport, and if I can't imagine taking that many swings that young, your body is going to break down. I think we see a huge number of injuries in younger players today because the overuse at young ages, and they just don't have that athletic base that we used to get because we participated in everything.
Yeah, that's right. We were more well-rounded.
Yes.
You know, and in my case, you know, getting to go surfing. I mean,
Right.
I think that was invaluable in terms of
Huge.
my recovery and the strength of my, you know, shoulders or whatever the case may be. But it's so right on, and the number of surgeries, Tommy John, you know,
Yes.
Jamie Moyer and I were just talking about this the other day, that the number of Tommy John surgeries is skyrocketing, and that something like 58% or 3, it doesn't matter, are teenagers.
Yeah.
So like, how is this happening?
Yeah, and I think it is. It's just this year-round, focus on sports for kids who are really young. And I think the other thing that has sort of gotten into this picture a little bit is, as I've gone through with 3 of our kids now, 3 of our 4, just the whole college process and finding a school and getting them into schools, and college has gotten really, really expensive. And I think for some families, getting a scholarship is a real opportunity for a kid to get a chance to go to school. So there's pressure for that as well, because that might be the only way they can afford their child going to school. And so there's a lot of pressure put on getting them to be an athlete and getting them to be a stellar athlete at a young age so they can get seen. I mean, in baseball, it's your freshman and sophomore year really is where you get noticed, and if it's past that window, you don't really have a very good opportunity of finding a college that you can play at, because those recruiting years are already over, and
Right.
and they've moved on to a different year. So it's really changed, I think, the landscape of amateur baseball, amateur sports in general, and parenting too. I mean, we see a change in parenting because there's that deadline, there's that rush to get your kids to be great really fast.
And if that's not working so well, by way of injury, by way of, maybe, the anxiety level in kids is higher because of that,
Right.
which I think is probably very right on. How does that change? Who is responsible for saying, hey, I'm not too sure this is working, and
Yeah.
we're going to go about it, and here's what I propose, and let's not play year round. What do you think?
I think I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's going to take people being willing to be countercultural to go against that tide, and it's really difficult. I know we were kind of awakened to it because our oldest daughter had played rec softball her whole life, no club sports, and she got to high school and she really had no chance to make the varsity team all the way through her high school career, because there were kids that were so much better than her because they had just played so much more. And at the end of the day, she didn't really mind, and it wasn't a big deal to her. But that was kind of awakening, like, wow, it really has changed. That was in order to do this. We did it differently, kind of unknowingly, because we were so involved with baseball, and just didn't understand the process like we should have. So we had kind of fallen into that. It was a wake-up call, like, it is different. It's a different landscape, and to do it differently takes a lot of willpower.
Well, I think that's it's going to be interesting to see. You said countercultural thinking. It's going to be like, where is that? Who's it going to come from? Where it's going to come from? Because I think it'll have to shift in time. I mean, there's only whether you're going to start them at 2.5,
Right.
and you're going to start running them around, the track at 5.
Right.
There's got to be an end point to it, so it will be interesting. So let's go back. This has been great to go off tangent here because it's important. But so post Brothers,
Right.
in
Yeah,
terms
back
of
to
inspiration, knowledge.
I had a really good high school coach, 2 really good high school coaches that really helped me along in the process. One was really an old school he was our head coach, baseball coach, Kirby Smith. Really an old school guy, but knew a lot about hitting and really was able to teach that very, very well. And I was able to learn at that point, how to hit to all fields. His big thing was hitting the ball the opposite direction, and how important that is. And huge gift. I mean, in terms of a skill, learning how to do that at a young age was huge.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful for that. Our pitching coach, Dave Engel, was also a great mentor of mine, probably more off the field than on the field, but had a great knowledge of pitching and also arm care. He was really an early pioneer in arm care.
What did you do?
Ironically, it was interesting, and I don't remember. I'm sure he told me, but I don't remember where he had picked it up. Probably, I know he played baseball at the University of Illinois. But we would take a tennis can and fill it with sand, tape the lid back on, and that was our weight that we would have, like these circular exercises we would do.
No kidding.
And it was kind of the early Job stuff. And it was, we just did it because he told us to do it. But I mean, as I got into baseball and further along, huge. I mean, it was arm care is really what it was, and what it's evolved to today. And I got that again at a very young age, and what a gift! What a gift!
Boy, that's like, how did he come up with that and know that would be beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, he picked it up somewhere, and it was a part of our warm-up routine. And even after we would throw, he'd have us do, ideally, high school kids, we probably skipped over on the after part, but a lot of times he'd have us do it, and again, to help learn how to take care of your arm and take care of your body.
That's a big lesson.
Huge.
That's a huge lesson. And at this point in time, maybe I'll just throw in the baseball mentorship and insights. Did that start to filter into the rest of your life? Was it helpful in school? Was it helpful in things non-baseball?
Yeah, I think at that age, I don't know that you can decipher that as clearly, but probably. I think I put a lot of effort into school. I put a lot of effort into whatever athletics I was in at the time, and that kind of became my focus. And I think there were things socially probably that I sacrificed that maybe I was able to learn early on that there are things you have to sacrifice if you want to be willing to get to a certain point. And I think again, grateful for a lesson learned that early.
Yeah, and then move on to Minnesota.
Minnesota had two great coaches there. They're still there today, and they're coaching my son, which is a really neat thrill for me to be able to go back and see Eli play. That's there.
So great.
Again, I think what I learned from them was more off the field, and I did learn a great deal about baseball. But at that age, you're so moldable, and you're becoming a young man, and so I learned a great work ethic there. I think I remember having a meeting. We were having a really poor season up to a certain point, and he sat us down, our head coach John Anderson, and said, "Hey, we got two choices. We can either fold up our tents right now and just ride the season out, or he used this analogy of construction workers. He said, or we can grab our hard hats and our lunch pails and we can get to work." And it was really interesting. It just hit me at a time, I think, that was impressionable, and hard hats and lunch pails became kind of a calling card for us as a team. And what a great mindset, right? You get to a point and you get to a juncture sometimes and you think, I've got two choices here. What's my choice? And again, learning that in the school situation in college, really, really helpful as I moved on in a baseball career, because you get to that point a lot. In 162 games season, you get to that point a lot. Like, I can either try to ride this out or I can get to work and try to make it a lot better. And it was words that can continue to ring through my head.
Yeah, and especially, obviously I didn't play in the big leagues, but I was around it and I could see what you guys had to go through.
Right.
That's a long season relative to, high school or the collegiate days.
Right.
And I saw the wear and tear, and it's like, okay, each day, what am I going to do? Am I going to pick myself up? Am I going to grab the lunch pail and
the hard hat,
or am I going to fold up? And you saw some people
fold up. Absolutely, and I'm grateful for that, for sure. What a great lesson. We still talk about that today, and if we email or text, it's usually some reference to a hard hat or a lunch pail, and it's pretty cool. But again, a great lesson to learn at a great time. I think getting into baseball, minor leagues, I had some great coaches. The one person that I remember in Cincinnati when I was first sort of introduced to big league baseball was a guy named Billy Doran, who Billy played, was an infielder, played with Houston, he played with Cincinnati some. But he was a guy that really took me under his wing, and for whatever reason, I don't know to this day why, but he was great and kind of taught me the ropes and showed me what it meant to be a big leaguer on a day-to-day basis. He was an older veteran at the time, and it wasn't my position or anything like that. It was just he was just a guy that was willing to talk to me about it, and I'm grateful for that. And Billy was very instrumental in me just getting introduced to the whole big league world, and I'm grateful that he took the time. I think it's one of the things about baseball that I really, really enjoy is that there's always been that sense, and I'm sure you have picked up on it when you were around it as well. There's always that taking care of the younger guy mentality in baseball, helping them along, and that mentorship sort of role that you have. It's not enough just to make it. Once you make it, then you've got to turn around and give it to the next generation. And I really love baseball for that very fact.
And I think that's so valuable for the young up-and-comings, that to be able to have that as a gift, as that mentorship, but also that now it's instilled in them that that's part of the game as well.
Yeah.
You're giving back, if you will,
even
though you're not necessarily finished with the career. So then in the Mariner days.
Yeah, a lot of great mentors here. When you spend 12 years in one organization, you get to know a lot of people, and a lot of people become very influential, instrumental. I think of Lou Pinella, obviously my manager for 9 of the 12 years here. Obviously a guy that taught me a lot.
What was the number one? Number one or two? If there are two. One is good enough.
I think the biggest thing, and it kind of goes along with what I learned in college, but is Lou demanded your best every single day, and he wasn't fluffy, and I think he was concerned only with results. That's really what he was concerned with. But that made you bring your A game every single day, and I respect that about him. I mean, that's what we should expect from ourselves is 100% of our A game every day, and we all learn to appreciate that over time. Matty Sinatra, obviously a guy who was my coach for a lot of years. We laughed a lot, and Matty kept things loose, which was a gift for a lot of years. I had great team mentors. Jay Buhner was the greatest in the clubhouse, great clubhouse leader. Gar was that quiet leader who you just kind of watched from a distance and saw what he did and thought, you know what, if this guy thinks it's a good idea, it's a good idea.
Yeah, right.
And then Junior obviously was a leader on the field, like whatever we needed, home run, great catch, here, I'll do it, and so he kind of led us there. But the two that stand out, the two mentors that stand out was, one was Lee Elia, who was our hitting coach for a number of years in Seattle. And I'm really excited because I'm going to get a chance to see him this weekend.
Oh, he's coming in.
He's coming in,
so
to
cool.
see Edgar and that
so
number
cool.
retirement. So he was the best, and I think again he taught me how to hit at the major league level. He really did, and put in countless hours, and we worked in the cage extensively. He did it with all the guys. It wasn't a one-on-one thing, but we did work one-on-one, and it was one of those relationships that just clicked. And we ended up impacting each other off the field more than anything. And so for me, it just became a place where I could vent and I could talk about things that had gone on the night before. And when I was struggling mentally, he was able to be there to sort of pick up the pieces and encourage me. And great storyteller. And
is that hard to find at the major leagues, to trust that you can talk to somebody honestly about what's going on without have it go up to the CEO or the president?
I mean, it is. Yeah, I think that there is an element of that it wasn't like it. I mean, it was a relationship that clicked right away, but I think organically over time it evolved into that more of a, you can lean on me and I can lean on you, and we can kind of work this stuff out together. And there's just a specialness to what we were able to experience. So that was a really another huge gift for me. The other one is you, and I got to embarrass you because Annie and I talk all the time, my wife, about just what a blessing that it was to be able to be introduced to you early on, and you don't go through 162 games, let alone catch during the season, without crushing your body, and to be able to have someone like you that had been through the ringer and all that stuff. To be someone that could just build you back up year after year. And I think some of my fondest memories are the season was over, we'd go sit down and have a beer or a cup of coffee, and okay, what are our goals for the off season? And the off season became almost more fun for me than the season because of our relationship, number one, but just it was fun. You made it fun, and you made it. I mean, we made great strides, and we had different goals, and we achieved the goals we were looking to set out to achieve, and just the relationship that we've developed over the years, I think, again, more off the field than on the field, so to speak, has been a gift for both of us, I hope. And then to pass that on to the kids, my kids, and Abe and Eli, being able a chance to get a workout with you and to experience that has just been, again, it's just one of those great gifts that you've brought to our family. So thank you. So in front of the podcast world, thank you, because it's what a gift.
Thank you, you're welcome, and thank you, because it's gone both ways, I tell you. It made my job, it wasn't even a job. It wasn't even a job. It was like, let's go on this adventure together and have some laughs and have some fun. As you said, fun, PH.
That's right.
That's you. That's you. So yeah, it was great, and still is great. 20 some years later, we're not going to count.
23.
He's still 29 though, in my eyes. So okay, so now at this point, so you've got this collective knowledge. These guys have given you the resilience early on, and so. How does that, if it does, I don't know, how does that impact your life today in the non-baseball world? Do you still have kind of tethers to the lunchbox and the hard hat? Do you still remember that in things that non-baseball day in and day out? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as a coach, it's obviously a different, it's a different kind of role or different way to look at the game, and so yeah, I mean those things ring true. I mean those things ring true as you parent your kids. You try to instill those kind of values in them as well. So you see that almost
right,
immediately kind of show up in a different arena, because those are things that you want your kids to aspire to. You want them to have a good work ethic. You want them to look out for others and help the next guy along, and all those things that I learned at a young age are important to your kids, and so they're a good foundation. And as coaches, I think it's super important to instill that in your players as well. And I think the game of baseball is changing at a really rapid pace right now. But those kind of pillars or principles probably don't ever change, and it's always going to be a good work ethic is what you're going to need in baseball. I mean, it's just there's no other way around it, or there's no other way I can see around it.
Yeah.
Even if you're a talented player, you need to put the work and the effort in, because baseball is a game of adjustments, and there are going to be adjustments you need to make, and you need to know, you need to be able to put the time in to make those adjustments. Yeah. It's just the way it goes, and so I think it's a different role, a different way to instilling those in other people is a different thing.
So what I didn't mention thus far was that you've been with the Mariners for a number of years, being a roving catcher instructor, and a lot more than that, I'm absolutely sure of, based on my knowing you. But within the last couple of years, they've also added, the big leagues. So you're now spending some time, on the road, or assuming maybe in town, doing the same. So now you're a coach, and what's your style of coaching now, using what you've learned in the past and what is, I'm assuming, filtered down into the kids you work with, young men you worked with, but then your own expression, your own evolution as a coach. How does that play out?
Yeah, I would say I played for most of my career for Lou Pinella, who was more of a in-your-face, going to tell you how I really feel about it right now, emotional kind of a coach. I'm not that way, not that I think that was ineffective. I think at the time that Lou Pinella was our manager, that was a very effective way. I think today that doesn't work as well with kids that come up. And I think what I have seen just in my experience in life, and the experiences that we've had, and the experience that I had with Ilya, and all those experiences, that it's relationships that can change people. It's not necessarily what I have information-wise to give you is going to change you. But if we have a relationship,
Right.
and we can relate to each other and understand each other a little bit, then the things I say are going to have a lot more meaning and a lot more carry in you. And so my approach is more relational. It's more getting to know kids, getting to be with them as much as possible, so that when I have something to tell them, they're going to listen, they're going to carry it with them a little bit more, and it's going to carry a little bit more weight because we have a relationship, not because I have information that they want.
And does that, the knowledge of them then aid you in being able to figure out how to address a certain issue, or how to make a correction or give some advice?
Yeah, and I think, maybe it goes back to like that pitcher-catcher relationship. Same was kind of true with pitchers. Like you kind of had to get to know them a little bit and understand them a little bit in order to motivate them, or to understand what a situation might call for. Do I need to go pat them on the back and say, hey, we're going to be fine? Or do I need to fire the ball back at them and say, hey, let's go? There's a couple of different approaches you can take with people and situations. And so understanding them enough to know, it's the same true as I think with coaching, is like you have to understand them enough to know when you can be firm, when you need to pat them on the back. I mean, baseball is such a failure-oriented game. Addressing something at the moment is probably not the best idea. It takes after the game or the next day when things have calmed down and you have a chance again to build a relationship, and then say, hey, I was thinking about last night, and here we go. Here comes the teaching moment. So I think that is more my approach than, when they come off the field after they've made the error, hey, you need to be doing this, this, and this. I'm not sure that helps as much.
Are you coaching today in a way that you might have liked somebody to have coached you when you were a young kid? Have you kind of looked back and said, "Well, I wish somebody would have said this to me, and so I'm gonna do that because I think it's important today"?
I think no. I mean, I can understand. I mean, I think I had good coaches all along, and they were just different styles. I think it's part of the way things have changed culturally. I think more so than anything, and I think today kids respond better to that
Right.
than someone that's going to be a little bit more old school. And I think the term old school really is
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
And I think things have changed, and there's a new school, and there's a new way to reach young players, and I think that's more it, at least in my opinion.
Right.
I found that to be more effective.
So let's touch on baseball in general and the changes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only been how many years since you played? It's just right around the corner.
12, yeah, it's been 12 years. Which went really
Huh?
fast. No,
I thought it was like 7, something like that. So you were saying baseball is changing. It is changing. How is it changing? Not only in terms of, I think you're going to go in the direction of a little statistics, but also in just what's it like to be in the clubhouse today versus back then. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say, technology has changed all of our lives, but technology really has had an effect on baseball, and I think that's where I've seen the biggest change. The way which players are measured today is much, much different than the way it was when we, just not too long ago. The statistics, the measurements, the stat casts, the way they can measure outfielders' routes to the ball and speed of their first step. I mean, there's so much more information out there, and I think clubs are using that information to make assessments on players. It's much more objective than it used to be. I think it was more subjective. It was more watching a guy, seeing him with your eyes, understanding what he can do, and it's just a different way to approach the game. And I think a lot of these changes, technology-wise, have happened within the last 5 years, and so it's changed that much really quickly. And so I think it's kind of a shock. Baseball's traditionally been a very traditional game, and things were done kind of the same way for years
Right.
and years and years and years. And now with technology, things have changed very quickly. The other thing that's changed is a clubhouse. I mean, it's no different than our lives, but the phones have changed our clubhouse. I mean, there's a lot less interaction, I think, between players, I would say.
Interesting.
Because there's more, because there's the phone, the accessibility to your own personal life, and we used to sit around a lot more and talk and share things about the game, and you see less and less of that, which the anecdotal, learning through anecdotes kind of thing is pretty powerful.
Do you think the players today have the most fun in the clubhouse? As I recall, players.
I think they do in some way. Those kinds of things I don't think change, but just and I've seen a lot of minor league clubhouses and I've seen some big league clubhouses too, but not as much. So I mean, it's really interesting, but again, I don't think that's a change that's not uncommon to any form of life, really. I mean, we've all got our nose in our phone quite often. So, the other thing that's changed are, to me, in terms of baseball wise, pitchers throw a lot harder today. Back when I played, Randy Johnson was probably the hardest thrower in the league, and he was 95, 96 at times probably. And he was one of maybe a handful of guys that threw that hard. Today, if you look at pretty much any bullpen in the major leagues, there are guys from anywhere from 95 to 100 that are throwing, and they probably have a handful of guys in their bullpen that throw that hard. So I mean, I think the game has changed a lot that way, and I think it makes it, again, that changes hitting, it changes catchers, it changes a lot of different things.
How has it changed for a catcher? What would that be like today to catch a guy who's throwing 100 miles an hour?
Yeah, it would be crazy. I think, and again, the higher velocity, just less reaction time, and the focus has to be so much more. Again, there's a lot more mental energy that would go into catching each pitch and watching it and focusing, and that would be a lot, especially later in the game when you're tired anyway. Here come these guys throwing close to 100. I mean, it would be crazy. I think calling a game makes a difference because these guys throw so hard. I think there's maybe less thinking that would need to be involved because you're gonna be able to blow a lot of guys away.
Just go with the power.
Yeah.
Just go with the heat.
So I mean, I think again, not better or worse or anything. It's just different. It's just different, and so you can kind of see when one thing changes, sort of the domino effect around the league. I think it's changed hitting quite a bit. There's a lot more scoring from home runs, and strikeouts aren't as big a deal anymore in terms of hitting because guys strike out more because guys are throwing harder, and so I think it's just you see one change and kind of how it affects the rest of the game. It's kind of interesting.
And I have to say, my experience of it, trying to think of a specific instance, what they don't have, but standing very close, maybe it was in the bullpen, and having somebody warm up and being very close to the catcher, and hearing the sound of a baseball coming in at maybe it was 85 miles an hour,
right,
and the sound it makes. I mean, people don't have any idea what that sounds like. The impact of the glove, the catcher's glove, but also just the sound of the ball flying through the air. I can't imagine what that would be like at 100 miles an hour. That's got to be just deafening almost.
Kind of ripping the air.
It's ripping the air, yeah. Fascinating stuff. So what's the downside of this new technology, if there is any?
I don't know that it would be considered a downside. Again, baseball's always been a game it's slow to change, but it has changed over time. And you look at, they talk about eras, and there was the DH was introduced at some point, and that changed the game. And they've raised the mound, they've lowered the mound, they've changed the baseball at times. I mean, it has been. There have been changes throughout the game, and again, I don't know if it's better or worse. We went to interleague play, and better, worse. It's up for debate. I think that's what's great about baseball. It's just different, and I think today is it's just different. And I don't know that it's a downside necessarily, but it's just a difference that the game has today.
When it was more subjective in determining players' value or potential, was there also looking at who this player was as a person? More of, what's the heart of this guy like? What does he stand for? And is that missed at all today, or is that still something that's very much integral?
I think it's still something that comes in the mix, and I do think that still kind of remains how an organization wants to look at a guy. I do think there's more information about him as a player due to all these measurements that they have now. And so maybe that, just because there's more information, maybe it takes a little bit more of a backseat. I don't know. But I would say that still remains, to me, the importance of what coaching really is all about. Because to me, if I'm a player and I'm physically just as good as another guy, the edge I'm going to have is my mental approach or my attitude or how hard of a worker I am. That's going to be what's going to differentiate me. And when you're talking about major league players, there are a lot of guys that are similar in ability, but what's going to set you apart from somebody else? And to me, that's the importance of the things that we can give players. Is here's something that maybe would differentiate you from someone else, and it's more of a mental edge. And this is how you can separate yourself.
And I was going to talk about, because of this weekend, Edgar Martinez, his number being retired by the Mariners. You're going to be down there with Jamie and Bone and the boys, and thinking about how somebody approaches the game, their work ethic, their resilience. Right. It seems to me that Edgar is such a pool of knowledge, and the way he carried himself, the way he played the game, his discipline. What are the things that you think, when you think about Edgar, that you think are kind of integral to, if you wanted to be a successful baseball player or anybody,
Right.
anything in life, what are those things about Edgar that you see that you really treasure?
I think one of the things that really sort of set him apart, there are those people who are really talented at what they do, that can't really explain to you what they do and how they do it. But Edgar is one of those sort of rare individuals that's really talented at what he does, but he also understands really well what it is that he does, and how he does it, and can pass that on. And I think that's unique. And I think a lot of that is because he, as a designated hitter, took so much pride in it, and was always willing to be open to change, and always looking at it from a different perspective, or how can I even make myself better? And maybe that comes from just not wanting to keep status quo, but always wanting to push the envelope in a certain direction. But I don't know where it came from for him, but he was always willing to look at it differently, and would come in with a different gadget, that he was going to try to do some drills with, and he came in with some funny stuff, but really brought a lot of attention to his craft. He made it a craft, and he would weigh his bats, and a tenth of an ounce made a big difference to him in terms of his bat. But the attention to detail, the ability to look at it differently, not being complacent, maybe is the word. Not being complacent and wanting to push it. I think that's what makes him unique. And then out of that was born like understanding his swing, understanding swings and pitchers, and he just understands hitting so well, the whole package of hitting.
What about his mindset that when he went, and I don't remember that he had many slumps in his career, but when he hadn't hit a home run in so many at-bats, or he was 0 for 7 or 8, how did he carry himself that was different than other players?
He wasn't different. That's what was different about Edgar. I mean, I think he was always here. It's interesting. I remember when I was with Cincinnati, being down in instructional league, and I ran across Sparky Anderson one day, the famous manager, and I was listening to him talk, and he said, son, if baseball is going to take you up here, and baseball is going to take you down here. He said, it's the guys that can stay in the middle. Those are the guys that do well. And I think of Edgar when I think of that, because that's where he stayed. He never got overly excited and never got down in the dumps too much. He always kind of stayed in the middle. And I think it's funny, in preparing for this weekend, I I've done some interviews about Edgar. And one of the things that I hadn't realized, when he hit the big grand slam against the Yankees, that I think they tied us up or put us ahead, I can't remember. It was a huge, huge grand slam. And I don't know that I really recognized or felt the impact of it at the time, but watching it, between first and second, he pumps his fist. And Edgar, that's not Edgar. So to see that, it kind of gives you chills because it was so impactful for him. Just to see him give a little bit of emotion, because he was always right here. You knew how impactful that moment was.
Yeah. Well, that's how I remember him as well. I got to spend a little time training with him down in Puerto Rico and certainly in Seattle as well. But boy, I think you nailed it with that sort of, the middle of the road.
Yeah.
I hit 4 home runs in a row. Pretty much the same as going 0 for 20.
Right.
I'm just gonna keep going out. Hit off the tee.
Yeah.
Hit off the tee. Hit off the tee. Make a little change. But yeah, I think I really appreciated what I learned from him by just watching.
Yeah.
And being around him. That was super. Okay, so what everybody has to talk about now. Where are you in your body today?
Oh. Okay.
So, what's your body like? How's your body treating you? What are the challenges of being in the body post baseball career? Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with baseball career. What are you doing? How are you feeling about you and your body? You and your body. How's that?
I'm feeling okay. Of course, you got me at a point where I've been pretty good about running. I haven't run in a week or so, so it's. Of course, I'm not feeling good about myself right now that way. But
we had coffee about 3 weeks ago, and you ran to meet me to have coffee, and that was like, you'll be back.
And you've got me, going for this bike ride, so I got some work to do. But I would say overall, I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm grateful. I think again for getting to know you and our relationship, because that has helped tremendously. And I think it's not that so much since baseball's been over. I think it was just the whole package during baseball that you taught me how to take care of myself in a very logical way. And it's a phrase we use at our house now a lot with my sons, because they're working with you. But listen to your body. I mean, it's just listen to your body, and I think it'll tell you when it needs a little bit more, and it'll tell you when it needs a little bit less. And I think, for me, I'm in a good space. I've been able to do some running, which I've never been a runner, but it's nice because it's an easy way to get out and to get some cardio going and get her heart rate up. And so I've enjoyed that. My wife's a big runner, so being able to go on runs with her occasionally is really, really nice. And
you try not to go too fast, though.
No, I don't go fast. I'm not breaking any speed records, trust me. Because the faster you go, the further you go, which means the further you got to
go back. I know.
Exactly.
It's that turnaround point.
That's
like
right.
the horse goes back to the barn a lot faster.
But yeah, I haven't had huge aches and pains, and so I'm grateful for that. I realize it's probably coming at some point, and there may be a day where I need to get something fixed somewhere along the line. But for now and for the most part, I feel pretty good, and I'm in decent health.
Any tips from Coach Dan about being in your body and dealing with it in a smart way, a wise way?
I think
I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, it's great. I think I'm learning more and more about nutrition and what you put in your body and how important that is. When you're expecting things out of your body, what you put in your body is really important. And I know we talked about that a lot as a player, and I think as our world gets faster and faster, it gets a little tougher and tougher to eat well or eat smart. But thankfully, my wife is great about that and does a pretty good job of helping me eat smart. If it were up to me, it would be Captain Crunch every morning. Because I love sugar.
I'm gonna be coming over your door. I'm just gonna be.
I love my sugar. I love my sugar, and it's a sugar world out there for sure.
Gosh, isn't it though?
But But I'm learning that fatigue and sleepiness and a lot of that can be attributed to what you're putting in your body and how important it is to know that and know the things to avoid.
That is absolutely so, and I'm still learning myself. It's to think about what do I put in my body and how does it make me feel?
Right.
You want to feel good, or you want to feel sleepy, and I know how to feel pretty sleepy.
Yeah.
With the foods
exactly.
I choose. Okay, I've got to ask you one thing. I think just one thing. Do you have a good Lou Pinella story? You've got to have a good Lou Pinella story. You do a great Lou Pinella, so.
I do.
Yeah, you do a good.
I'm trying to think. Well, you put me on the spot because sometimes I can remember them and sometimes I can't.
Maddie around Lou around Maddie. I'm just trying to spur you.
Yeah, no. One of the great things about Lou was he was pretty quick, and he was quick-witted, and so he could come up with a one-liner pretty well. We had a player. I'll keep names out of it just to make it a little easier. But we had a player who was an outfielder, and he was struggling at the plate a little bit. And so there was a play in the outfield where this outfielder ran into our shortstop, and the outfielder actually ended up getting a concussion and missed some time. And I remember Lou talking to him about it, and they were chuckling about it a couple days later. I think he had to go on the DL for a while, and it was a big deal. He hurt himself pretty good, and he hurt his head. And after the DL stint, and after things got back to normal and comfortable again, I remember the outfielder and Lou talking one day, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "Son," he called everybody son. He said, "Son, if you could hit the ball like you hit your own teammates, you'd be a really good hitter." He said.
Come on, you gotta do it in his voice though.
Oh, no. Son, he said, "Son, if you'd hit the ball like you hit your teammates, you'd be a 300 hitter," he said, just like that. And of course, he could break up the bus, and it was just the quick wit that he had. That he was phenomenal. But there were a lot of comments like that he was the best.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I hate to wind up here, but I suppose we should. You do have to get to the stadium by Saturday. We've got about 24 hours to get there. So have a great time down there.
Thank you.
With the boys, and thank you very much for hanging out. Love being with you. Love you, brother.
Yeah, love you too. And anytime we can do this, let me know.
We'll do it again for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Till next time.